Justice Gap, a little less fun than theme parks actually. If you get arrested and you can't afford a lawyer, the court will appoint one for you, and that's us. We're the Shelby County Public Defender's Office. Our chief public defender is a guy by the name of Stephen Bush. You may have seen him last week on the cover of the Memphis Flyer. He has a giant red arrow that follows him around everywhere he goes. He's been the public defender for 18 months. Before that, for 18 years, he was an assistant public defender. And I want to tell you about my client named Ray, who was born in Memphis, graduated Carver High School. When he was 23 years old, he served on this aircraft carrier all around the world. But by 49, he was on the streets of Memphis, a crack addict, on the margins of society. When I was 25 years old, I started working as a public defender in Division 10 of General Sessions with people on the margins of society. Eventually, I met Ray, who was drooling, drunk, high every time he came to court. But he was my client, and that was around the year 2000. Also around the year 2000, incarceration rates began to skyrocket. We were in a war on drugs, we got tough on crime, and consequently, you see what happened. Between 1980 and the year 2000, our prison and jail population went from 300,000 to over 2 million. If you include people on probation and parole, 1 in 31 Americans today are under some sort of control of the correction system. One guy who's been under control of the correction system before, you probably will recognize, is the great Robert Downey Jr., who engaged in some questionable behavior, but not to fear. He had some big-name lawyers who came to the court, and they presented the judge with an idea that they could address his addiction instead of simply punishing him. And you know what? The judge bought it, and he got probation. Well, back to my client, Ray, who, again, was fortunate enough to have been in the Navy. He also got that opportunity to address his addiction instead of simply being locked away. He received therapy, training, help for his addiction. None of that would have been possible for him if it hadn't been for this guy, Clarence Gideon, who in 1961 hand-wrote a brief to the United States Supreme Court, which read it and granted all of us the right to appointed counsel anytime we face incarceration. So this is what it looks like today in Memphis. 74 lawyers up against 34,000 cases in 2010. And you might think, how many cases can one lawyer handle? And we have ideas about that. The Justice Department, in fact, has a great idea about that. And they say that it's 400 cases, certain types of cases. We won't get into that. But this is what we end up doing. So we can break that down a little more. We've looked at a random day not too long ago in one of our courtrooms, and we found that each public defender in that courtroom was responsible for 30 cases that day. And if you break that down a little bit more, based on an 8-hour court day, which is really a stretch because most of the judges are not on the bench for 8 hours, it's way less than 16 minutes per case during that day. And what that means is we have to deal with clients like my client Ray, who are homeless, who are mentally ill, who are addicted. And we have to do it 16 minutes at a time. And for Ray, that took months and months and months. And it's simply not enough time. And it's created a problem for our system, especially with the mentally ill. They get help in jail, they get medicated, and they get treatment, but they go out and they decompensate and they come back in. So we have this revolving door, and around and around and around it goes. One thing we've done, one little ray of hope that we have at the Public Defender's Office is something called the Jericho Project, where we intercept those folks while they're in jail, and we plug them in with services in the community that already exist. We get them counseling, we manage their medication, we get them help, and when they leave, they don't come back as often. We've slashed the recidivism rates in half with our folks in the Jericho Project. The guy that built the Jericho Project, the red arrow following him around, is Stephen Bush. He's got great ideas about how to replicate this, about how to scale this to other folks who need help, the homeless, the chronically ill. And because what we know is that when you're in contact with the criminal justice system, this is my art, you're welcome. And many of us are in contact with the justice system. There's a gap between the things that we want to do, the opportunities that we need to get houses, to get cars, to get jobs. At the Public Defender's Office, we're in a unique spot because we're right there at that moment when people need us the most. We can build a bridge. The JFNG stands for Justice for a New Generation, which you'll see again in a minute. And we can build a bridge, which luckily for my client Ray, we did. Ray is still in Memphis and has a big, huge life. He has a job, he supervises 17 people, he has a house with a mortgage, he has a Cadillac, it's his second one, and he knows about the Justice Gap because he crossed the Justice Gap. So tonight I want you guys to know about the Justice Gap. I want you to tell your friends about the Justice Gap. I want you to tell your friends about public defenders who stand in that Justice Gap. And I want you to know that if we can somehow leverage this moment for the least among us, to access these services, we can have a great city, we can have a just city, and we can have justice for a new generation.